Good morning, everyone. It is 8:01, and so I'm going to call the meeting of the Community Justice Collaborating Council to order. We clearly have a quorum, and I really appreciate everyone's efforts in being here this morning. I do want to introduce Supervisor Paul Adams, who is substituting for Bob Fiedler. Supervisor Adams is on the Public Protection Committee, and we certainly welcome him to the meeting this morning. The minutes were circulated as part of your materials from our last meeting on January 12. Are there any additions, corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, they will then stand as submitted. We have, I know, a number of people in the gallery. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment this morning? Any public comments? Judge Black. Not part of the public gallery, but we will welcome your comments.
So, I don't want to freak everybody out. A couple things. As I get older, my filter is kind of going away. Some of you know that if you've been in my courtroom. But I debated about bringing Warden with me today. But there's been some talk about getting a dog for this courthouse. And he's been here, and I don't want to overstay his goodwill here by bringing him too often. But I had a sentencing yesterday, and for some reason, the thought came to me, because of the person in front of me, does this person have connections to get a dog for this courthouse? Because I know the sheriff has talked about, so has Mr. Anderson. And is it a little unusual? Absolutely. But especially in juvenile cases, you'd be amazed what impact this animal has on people, and especially kids. So again, little out of the ordinary, but that's my life. So that's all I got.
And welcome to Warden also. I should have included him in my welcomes this morning. He is a frequent visitor to the back hallway and has a direct beeline to my court reporter who feeds him periodically, and so he knows where the food spots are in the building. So welcome to Warden, and Judge Black is absolutely correct in terms of the therapy that he provides, even to those of us who are in the system. Any other public comments? Hearing none. Under business items, I first am pleased to introduce our new 10th District Court Administrator. For those of you not familiar with court organization, we have 9 judicial districts in Wisconsin. Now you may ask yourself, if we have 9, why is Mr. Munn's DCA of the 10th? Well, because they eliminated District 6 a number of years ago but didn't renumber. So we still are the 10th district, albeit with only 9 districts in the state. The 10th district covers pretty much from Eau Claire up to Superior, from Hurley across to Burnett County. So it's 14 counties, the largest geographic district in the state, 31 judges, soon to be 32, when Sawyer elects their new judge in April. And Chris Channing, who had been our DCA, resigned near the end of the year, and with great efficiency, the Director of State Courts, Randy Koshnick, and his crew was able to recruit and hire Ross Munns, who joins us today. So we welcome him, and I did say I would ask him to at least make some comments. He joins us from North Dakota, so snow and cold are not foreign to him. And travel is not foreign to him, as I believe North Dakota has 6 districts, and so you can imagine the geography that their administrators cover. So, Mr. Munns, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Judge. Thanks everyone for welcoming me. It's been just in week 3, and so I made it this far. Elated to be here. Been looking for something like this and waiting for a while. Have a long history of in and around the justice arena. Started out with the Department of Corrections back in 1994 in North Dakota, as Judge said. Primarily working with youth, but our youth, we keep them until they turn 21. And so some of the aspects, including positions of Director of Treatment, Assistant Superintendent for our state facility, West Regional Manager, the geography, the travel, I rather enjoy it. When I first looked at the map, speaking to colleagues about the potential fit here, looked at the geography, and I actually was surprised and welcome it. I do enjoy getting out and about. I was actually in Chippewa Falls yesterday, and over in Eau Claire, getting to meet the staff and the judges. And so I'm very much looking forward to these types of partnerships. Worked for the city of Mandan also for a stretch, and so working with the police department and the sheriffs in the counties is very much a high priority for me, so I'm thrilled to see this sort of arrangement.
Thank you. And we house the district office here in the Government Center for decades. The office was located in Eau Claire. And when I was chief judge, we made a decision to relocate to Hudson primarily to attract good candidates and to attract qualified candidates. And I think certainly that move has paid off for us, and we welcome Ross not only to St. Croix County but to the district. Phil is going to introduce a new case manager who we have in Justice Services. Phil.
Sure, thank you, Judge. So Lori Rosas, Lori, if you just want to give a quick wave, thank you, is the new Government Center case manager, and she's affiliated with behavioral health, so this is an ARPA-funded position, but she will be spending, I would say, at least half or a majority of her time here in the Government Center. And a lot of you that work in the court system will see her during intake in the afternoon. That's going to be one of the spots where she starts to interact with clients. So this position, again, ARPA funded through the end of 2024, is meant for early intervention. And so I think the intake process will be a good place for her to start to interact with clients. But if you all have clients who might benefit from services from Lori, please introduce yourself and network with her so she has the opportunity to start interacting with those folks.
So we welcome Lori. The judges met with her last week, and what I can certainly indicate from that first meeting is that she has a passion for what she does, and a passion will, I think, in that particular position serve her well as serve the county. Any questions about that? TAD grant update, Phil and Lisa, or Phil.
No, Lisa, I'll definitely rely on Lisa and Kate to chime in here as well. So TAD grant, we just within the last probably 30 days have closed out. So again, TAD is our Treatment Alternatives and Diversion grant that largely funds at least part of diversion, part of our treatment court. We closed out 2022 as far as our budget and our narratives, and so that doors kind of closed, and we're here in 2023. Just as a bit of an update, as part of 2023, we back in the fall asked for and received an additional roughly $32,000 in funding, which supports a data entry specialist that is split evenly between diversion and treatment court. Tara is our data entry person. She's working, again, 12 hours with each department, doing a really great job catching us up on some of our data entry. Before I pass it off to Lisa and Kate, I just want to provide kind of an update on Compass assessments. So for those of you that are in the justice system, I've sent some emails around about Compass assessments, and I might rely on Craig here to provide some additional information. Last week, we received an email, I did, from the Department of Corrections regarding the Compass assessment. So Compass is a risk needs assessment that the state of Wisconsin uses, Department of Corrections, and then the counties use it as well to assess risk and need for individuals. The email was a bit unclear at first. It was regarding how appropriate the Compass assessment actually is for some of our clients, specifically treatment court and diversion. So the timing, it was a bit strange, but the idea was DOC was letting county leadership know that they were not certain that the Compass was appropriate or even valid for our populations. So it felt, again, a little bit out of left field, but after some further clarification from the company Northpoint that developed the instrument, we are still able to use the Compass assessment for diversion and for treatment court. So that's kind of the short of it. There's probably more to come. I started to question, again, Craig, I'm gonna have to rely on you here. Sorry to put you on the spot a little bit. Why now? I mean, the Compass assessment's been used for quite some time. So why was this email coming out now? And I think it's because they just came out with a revised version, which is pretty standard for risk and needs assessments. So more to come, but in Justice Services, Tina and Kayla will still continue to provide the Compass assessments for treatment court, for diversion, and other clients. Craig, do you have anything additional to that?
No, this is the first I'm hearing of it. We did, back in August, we did switch. They changed some questions, took off some questions, so I don't know if you're still using the Compass Core. We switched to the Compass Core R, which was updated in August of 2020, but this is the first I'm hearing that the DOC contacted you, yeah.
So, and again, the only thing I can think of is it's due to like a revalidation study. Again, risk and needs assessments constantly go through this to make sure that the questions that we're asking to determine someone's risk is that they're still valid for the population. But I will gather more information and continue to update the court and everyone else. Questions on that? Or Lisa, Kate, if you guys want to add anything?
I would just like to add to clarify just a little bit more about it is that I think the main issue was pre-charge or like deferred prosecution issues. They had indicated that if it was post-conviction, then there was no problems. Because of the tool was validated on a post-conviction of offenders. So our question to them was, well, is a deferred judgment post-conviction, considering the fact that the person pleads, but then the conviction is set aside? And so when they came back with the answer from North Point, they indicated that it's fine to use it for that purpose, that we can still use it for determining risk and criminogenic needs. The issue is more of like for pre-charge or deferred prosecution cases, which we do not have a lot of those, and majority of those we could look at if it's TAD appropriate or not. So that's the only issue that we're looking at right now, because they did indicate, I think a couple days ago, that it's fine to use it for DGOCs. So we kind of had a little bit more clarification, but it was a bit of a scare seeing that we've been using it for 8 years. But I think all is good on that.
Kate, any comments, or Lisa, about TAD grant itself, anything?
The only thing that I do have is that Jenna Hines, the diversion program case specialist, she's been on maternity leave since January 1. She will be back on March 27th. So we will be back to being fully staffed that day.
Thank you. Kate, anything? Okay. Any questions about TAD grant or this Compass risk need assessment? Thank you. Treatment court update, Judge Nordstrand, Kate.
Well, I'll let Kate get into some of the details if she'd like about the current status. I think the focus here for today is about our treatment services. I think that's been the issue. I don't know when we last talked and who I talked to, but I do recall, I think, talking to CJCC about the fact that we've had a transition now. We've started transition to new treatment services. So in the past 15 years, or 16, I guess, in treatment court, the treatment services have been provided by HHS internally from the county. In December, HHS let us know that that wasn't going to be able to continue going forward, at least on the short term, and then effectively in the long term, because the kinds of services that we need, which includes intensive outpatient treatment for treatment court participants, is not something that the department is going to be providing on an ongoing basis for various reasons. So we had to find another provider. We looked to Programs for Change, which is part of the Hudson Hospital and Westfields Hospital and Health Partners, and we've made that transition. So we've now started having folks in treatment court who are presently in treatment court, have had evaluations and assessments by Programs for Change. They've started the programming there. It seems to be working out quite well. We even have the option, which is beneficial, of having some folks can participate in Hudson and some in Richmond, depending on the needs that they have and the services that are provided in each location, so that helps. So the transition's ongoing. I don't think have we had an assessment yet for a new participant? Okay. We had to close treatment court to new participants back in December when that happened. Not long ago, we reopened admission, which is a good thing because we're down to about, I think with yesterday's graduation, 13 or 12? Something like that. That's a pretty low number for us. We have the capacity to be at 20 or a bit more and have been in the past, so we're looking at bringing in new folks, and there are a number of people that have applied, that are in the process, and we hope to add new folks very soon. Had a graduation yesterday. I'd encourage folks to come to treatment court. Take a look at what we do here in St. Croix County and treatment court. We have had a number of county board members who are regular attendees. I see them almost every week, and that's very encouraging, and frankly, it's encouraging to our graduates because we've had county board members who congratulate them on their success right there in the graduation ceremony, and that's much appreciated by them. And you get a context for what we're actually doing. I think that would be helpful to everybody. So every Wednesday morning at 8:30, all you got to do is go up to courtroom 1 upstairs, and you can see what it is we do here. And it's, I think, unique, and I'll say this again, the number of people that we serve in this county in treatment court is, I think, way out of proportion to this little county. And that's a very positive thing because my recollection was I went to a meeting of treatment court judges last year and was talking to the Milwaukee County head of specialty courts. They have lots of courts, right? And I asked her about her drug court, I think they call it, which is comparable to what we do here. They have lots of courts, but they only had 50, 60 people in all of Milwaukee County participating, I think, in that range. So imagine that all of Milwaukee County has 50 or so, and we have hopefully we'll get up to in the low 20s at least. So that's a testament to this county's commitment to treatment court. And I'm always mindful, yes, there are things like TAD grants, but the TAD grant is a very small portion of what it costs to run treatment court. And this county steps up every year to pay for the vast majority of what treatment court costs, and you should come and see what that looks like. So, Kate, any other updates that you'd like to provide?
The only other updates is really just that the referrals are open. They were trickling in a little bit, and now they're coming in fast and furious, I would like to say. So trying to schedule those out, get these people in as fast as possible. So with our transition from behavioral health to programs for change, obviously there's going to be that transition period and how fast we can get things rolling. But that's been going well. We are going to the Wisconsin National Conference for Treatment Court Professionals. That will be coming up in April. We have most of our team going to that. And we also have our national conference that we're sending a few members to, along with Judge Norstrand.
Any question about treatment court? Hearing none. Justice support update. Phil.
Thank you, Judge. This update is actually, I think, applies larger than just to our department, but to the justice system. So one thing that's been discussed on and off with behavioral health and some others is adding a remote drug testing site or location in the county for folks that are justice involved and otherwise. So we've been looking into this, and I want to thank Char Lopez. She met with Taylor Mabus from Facilities a week or so ago to look at some space in New Richmond to talk about this possibility moving forward. So we've started that process. We've kind of tabled it for maybe a month or so, but it's something I think as we move towards the budget season for '24 and later on that we're going to look at doing. I think there's a contingency of justice involved persons that would really benefit from testing in New Richmond as opposed to coming all the way to Hudson. So I'll provide more updates on that, but that's kind of an ongoing project that will include multiple departments and other individuals.
Yes.
That would benefit treatment court greatly. I just want to make that known because for whatever reason, the housing situation for folks that are justice involved and involved in treatment court and otherwise is much more available in Richmond than it is in Hudson. I think it has to do with costs. It has to do with the community's willingness to embrace things like sober houses and all of that, which I'm very supportive of. But the reality is there's more of that available in Richmond than there is here. And most of our folks tend to wind up in Richmond rather than in Hudson. So.
And I don't think this comes as a surprise, but many of the people in this population are transportation challenged. They don't have driver's license. They don't have reliable people who can get them down here to test. They have housing challenges. As Judge Nordstrand said, you know, we have Grace Place in Richmond, I think, which is the only homeless shelter in the county. And it serves a lot of the same population. And then the other dynamic is we have human services in Richmond where people can get their mental health. They can get those types of services by walking as opposed to some of these others. So I likewise encourage Phil and his team to look at that as a viable option because it really, I think, would help from the standpoint of pretrial monitoring, but just from the side of assisting people who are already potentially down and out and having expectations of them. So any questions of Phil about justice support? Yes, Bob.
Judge, I was just going to say that I met with Taylor briefly the other day, and we looked at the plans for how to renovate an area in HHS to make that compatible with what we need. He's going to get some quotes for that, so when we're ready to go, we'll see what it costs and when that could be done.
And Ken will sharpen his pencil. And any other questions? Justice Support Partnership with University Year. Phil.
Thank you. So University Year is the kind of advisory body through UW-Madison that we worked with in the fall. It was a Masters of Public Health class that we worked with, and a couple projects that we put forth back during the summer, looking at residential, increased residential treatment options for treatment court participants and otherwise, as well as sober living facilities here in the county. And we worked with two teams of graduate students who helped us do some background and literature review. We took a pause this semester. They didn't have a class to match us with. So this is an ongoing 2 to 3 year project. But I spoke with our rep recently, and I think there's a match for us, a psychology graduate class for the fall. It's a faculty member, and her name is escaping me now. She does research in reentry, so jail reentry, but she also has an interest in folks that are, that need sober living and facilities. So she has a team of students or this part of this course that would like to maybe interview some of our justice-involved individuals in the county to talk about, I have my ideas of what homelessness or housing challenges look like, but I think we maybe all do, but to hear from the folks that this really impacts, I think would be helpful, so to get some input. And so that's something that we're looking at doing. Our point of contact through University Year, I think is going to come in May and talk to us about these projects. So he'll be able to provide some more context for what this looks like moving forward.
And I think we circulated it, but there was an article in one of the university publications about this partnership. St. Croix was mentioned by name. Our chief judge, Judge Boyle out of Barron, saw it in the publication, so she forwarded it on. So if we didn't get that out, we will. But it was, again, pretty flattering that St. Croix is one of the counties that the U is partnering with. Any questions about that effort? Thank you. MRT update, Phil.
Sure. So we are, Tina, we were just talking about this, 6 or 8 weeks into MRT?
We currently have 7 active participants and then 1 on the pending list that we're working on getting admitted.
So all DOC referrals, so Craig, thank you to you and your team. So again, MRT, moral recognition therapy, we started in January and been going for a couple months now. If you have folks that are justice involved that could benefit from some cognition change or changing criminal thinking errors, whether it's treatment court, diversion, DOC, please let Tina, Kelly, or myself know. But those groups are going well. We've got one other staff, Kayla from treatment court is trained, and our other case manager, Courtney from pretrial, will be trained. And so we're running the one group now. It is a male-only group. You know, I think as we get further into 2023, depending on staffing, we might be able to offer a second group. But for right now, just the one group.
Any questions about MRT? Again, it's really getting people to think in a non-criminal way. That's the essence. As I have said for a while, my fear is that we have raised a generation of kids without consciences who don't know the difference between right and wrong. And we're trying, obviously, and through this type of programming to reshape thinking, to reshape why when you do something wrong, hopefully there's something inside you that tells you that. And so we certainly commend Phil for taking that on, because it was a void when DOC opted out. Ms. Garrity.
Judge, is that just adults? Is there any focus on juveniles? Could we make a focus on juveniles?
Just adults. I'm not aware of a cognition group for juveniles. I'm sure that there are out there. I mean, correctional cognition groups are very popular, but I'll pass it to Tina.
So during our training, they do offer it for juveniles. It is a different curriculum, but it is similar to the adult version, but there is the program for juveniles as well.
So I think what Judge Garrity is suggesting is that if there's any way, Tina, to explore that, if we would have the staff, both from our standpoint in dealing with the juveniles in the circuit court, but we have a number of municipal courts that likewise deal with juveniles every day, probably in greater volume than what we're dealing with here as circuit court judges. So if you can explore that, it's something at least that we can put on our radar. You're welcome.
The funding for that, though, is coming from the Department of Corrections.
Correct.
Right now. So the program with the adults that are in there, they're all from the DOC, and they're the ones that pay for that, so I just don't want that piece to be left out.
Sharpen your pencil, Ken. Anything else on MRT? Mental Health Summit. Mr. Raritt.
Thank you, Judge. Yes, there's a mental health summit coming up on April 21st in Madison. It's the Chief Justice's Summit on Mental Health in Madison. And let me just give you a little bit of background where this came from. But the Wisconsin Summit resulted from a regional summit held in Vermont last year, where representatives from Wisconsin, including Chief Justice Ziegler, myself, and Chief Young from River Falls, joined other New England states to examine state courts' response to persons with behavioral health conditions entering the court system. And the focus was on systems change that deflects and diverts people with mental health and substance use disorders away from the courts and away from emergency departments toward behavioral health services and support options. So there was a final report issued last October from those regional meetings that were held around the country. I have a copy of that. I have it electronically if anyone would like to see it. But it outlines all of the recommendations that were issued as a result of those regional summits. And then the Wisconsin Summit that we're having in April will include national, state, and local perspectives on crisis intervention response, law enforcement training, and youth mental health. In addition, a group of judges and staff who recently attended a workshop in the Miami-Dade County Mental Health Court Program will share what they learned on the sequential intercept model and system mapping, use of mental health assessments in jails, peer support, and other topics. This is by invitation only. There's limited capacity. What the state courts recommended was that a contingent of about 4 representatives from each county in Wisconsin could attend, not including those of us on the steering committee. That's myself, Chief Young, and Char Lopez. So we can actually take 7 people. And who's agreed so far, I think, is Judge Black, Phil Golly, Sheriff Knudsen, and then we have one other vacancy. So we may want to decide who else might be a good fit for this. I had invited Brandy Hart, but she's not able to make it, so we have an ability to take one additional person. The purpose of this is that the representatives from each county, and these representatives typically consist of judges, human service professionals, CJCC coordinators, and law enforcement. Typically, that's the makeup of the groups that they would like to see at the summit. So after the summit, these representatives from each county are intended to go back to their county and talk about what they've learned and try and apply some of those concepts to their local counties, their local systems of care. Now, the CJCC Behavioral Health Subcommittee has already been talking about this, not just this summit, but about this topic of drafting a white paper around services that we already offer throughout the county for people with behavioral health conditions who interface with the court systems, with emergency departments, end up in jail. Jails have essentially, and prisons have become de facto mental health institutions, de facto detoxification centers. And the idea here is, of course, for those nonviolent offenders that end up in the court system, in the jail, in emergency departments, how do we locally develop systems of care that respond to their behavioral health needs more effectively and prevent them from cycling through courts and jails and emergency departments. So our behavioral health subcommittee has formed this work group that's going to work on this white paper. We decided to hold off until after this summit to really draft the bones of this white paper, so we can see what we learned from that. But again, the idea is to look more locally at how we can better serve this population. I think, unless there are questions, again, I can send out more information about this summit and about the final recommendations that were put out last October. But this is a really, this whole idea fits nicely with some of the concepts that we've already implemented around these ARPA positions, where we have someone here at the government center now, we have 2 co-responders, we have case managers that go into the community and oftentimes meet with people who have some kind of criminal justice involvement. Chief Young in River Falls is a big proponent of this. The sheriff is supportive, I think, of these kinds of efforts, and it will be good to have Judge Black there to provide your perspective on all of this. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
And because we do have an opening, if there's anyone in this body who would have an interest, get a hold of me, Phil, or Bob, because this group obviously is intimately aware of the mental health challenges that we have in the justice system. And so if there's anyone who would be interested, we'd like to fill out our team. We did get a very lengthy memo from our Chief Justice yesterday encouraging judicial participation. So Judge Black is our delegate.
So Judge Enum volunteered me for this committee, and initially I thought this was going to deal with mental health of judges. I thought, well, man, you got the right person for this job. But I have to admit, if Judge Waterman's trial settles, I might be volunteering him. But about 20 years ago, after I became a judge, I met with a representative from another part of the state with some people up in Barron County along this issue. And they said, what do you need? Well, we need resources. We need some funding. And everybody in this room knows what we haven't gotten in the last 20 years. And I'm hoping that this summit can convince the legislature that there's more counties in this state than southeast Wisconsin. And everybody in this room knows what I mean. And we need this, and Judge Enum hit on a point regarding kids not being raised with the difference between right and wrong. To me, plus you add the pandemic and the closures in this, we have a tidal wave coming. And if we're not ready for it, we're going to be overwhelmed if we aren't already. So I'm really hoping that something will actually come out of this, and Judge Waterman, just, you know, just in case, just.
Yes. Ms. Peterson?
Yes, so I serve on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, so I've had the pleasure of reading through the summit materials, and I really love to take this opening for the manager of the emergency department at Western Wisconsin Health, where we see a lot of these challenges, and I think could really benefit from both being a part, but also learning and taking those lessons back to the hospital.
Thank you. Ms. Ring, you had a... Okay, all right. Sheriff, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but, you know, we built the specialty cells a number of years ago. What's our average census in those specialty cells?
There is no openings in there. There's 9 of them, and it's, you know, it is mental health or those that are in crisis, detox, and those that just can't be around others, where it's fights or serious damage to property, and to get them back on medications. There's one that we had some serious issues throwing bodily fluids every chance he could get on anybody that went by. So we had to, so they are well used.
I knew the answer to the question, so it was somewhat of a setup. But, you know, at least for the county board and others who approved that particular renovation, I'm sure at the time you were thinking, well, you know, is this money well spent? And I think that's your answer, that unfortunately these specialty cells we hoped would never be filled, but I know on a day-to-day basis they are filled, and probably a waiting list for those in the population who might benefit, or to protect other inmates, which sometimes is the case as well. Any questions on that mental health summit? Yes. Bob.
Just one more thing, Judge. One encouraging attendee at the regional summit in Vermont was the Medicaid director from Wisconsin. There were a number of Medicaid directors there, so I spent some time with her trying to talk about ways in which Medicaid could be structured to support this population. And hopefully that will lead to some kind of sustainable effort with support from Chief Justice Ziegler and others. So,
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Introduction of the partners from the Center for Effective Public Policy. Phil's going to take this one.
Yes, thank you, Judge. So we have a guest here. Lakeisha, if you want to give a quick wave. So Lakeisha Fisher joins us from the Center for Effective Public Policy, and then an organization advancing pretrial policy and research that we've been working with for 3 months now. So some of you might have met Lakeisha and her counterpart Tanya were on site yesterday doing a site visit. So they're joining us as we continue this transition from a law enforcement model of pretrial services to a civilian-run model. We applied for this back in the fall, and they agreed to join us in this partnership, and we're very grateful for them. They were very helpful and have been, and you know, Shelby has been very instrumental in this process as well, and so we'll continue to work with them for the next several months. They'll be doing a follow-up site visit later on, and so we really appreciate the support they've provided.
Thank you. And the judges met with Letitia and the other person from the Policy Center yesterday, and their resumes are incredible in terms of pretrial services and pretrial programming. So we really look forward to partnering with them, and certainly willingness to hear any suggestions that they have. As Phil said, we transition from our law enforcement model to our civilian models. Letitia, anything that you wanted to say?
No, I think you summarized it very well.
Okay. Thank you.
We look forward to working with Shelby and Phil as we continue to revamp and transit pretrial justice system. So they've been some great hosts. So thank you. We look forward to working with you.
And she joined us from Indiana, so I'm going to skip a little bit. I'm going to go to 11 subcommittee reports before we really get to the heart of the meeting today. So subcommittee, executive committee, we continue to meet. One topic that we are seriously exploring, I think I kind of inkled this in January, was the formation of a child protection juvenile justice subcommittee. I introduced at our last meeting, and it will take some bylaw changes as well as approval, I believe, by the body. But our sense is that given the continuing need that we have to attract foster families in St. Croix County, and that's unfortunately a reflection of the number of kids who we have going into out-of-home placements, given the CASA and their integration now into our child protection sector of what we do as judges, having a subcommittee to work with CASA, to work with the department, our guardian ad litems and others to come up maybe with ideas or suggestions that this group can embrace. And as I said, so we'll hopefully put some meat to that particular concept and bring it back to you at our next meeting for a formal consideration. And so as we're developing this, if there's any of you who may have an interest in serving on that type of subcommittee, Judge Garrity or otherwise, you can let me know, and we will start to pilot that and get it up and running. Our next meeting, I think, is on April 27th. We welcome anyone to attend our executive committee meetings, but that is really the gist. There's also some fine-tuning of our bylaws that Kate Avalos and Phil are working on. It's just some tweaking. Also expanding our non-voting member representation to include, again, some of these groups and organizations that really have a significant involvement in the justice system but don't really have a formal seat at the table at this point. So we'll bring that back to you, and I believe at our next meeting. Criminal justice, Judge Waterman.
I don't have much to report. Our committee meets every other month, and then we have a small subcommittee consisting of me, Carl, Travis, the public defender, Phil Gawley, and Shelby. It's one of those days, I'm sorry. And our primary focus has been to work on the justice support focus, the monitoring services, the drug testing, and trying to find ways to make that more efficient, more effective, and deliver for the client population. So we're meeting in small groups, or a small group, to try to refine and improve on our delivery of services.
And Judge Waterman kind of minimized, but his subcommittee has been doing a lot of work in terms of our testing and step downs and how do we recognize those who remain sober, which helps with the volume in the Justice Support Center, but also I think supports those who are on their road to recovery. So they made a presentation yesterday, and I think we really got a lot out of that, and hopefully we'll put many of those ideas now into reality as a system. Any questions of Judge Waterman about what's happening with criminal justice? Judge Nordstrand, Kate, you've reported anything additional?
So beyond what we're doing in the treatment court subcommittee, beyond the treatment issues, it's now time for us to turn back, I think, to our policy issues, and that is we've got to update our general policies for treatment court, our policy and procedures manual, as well as our handbook for each participants. And you may recall from a couple of meetings back, we talked about how our treatment court for the past few years has had two tracks, separate tracks. In other words, they came to court in separate parts of the treatment court day. Generally speaking, our track one folks had the greater needs in terms of treatment needs. They tended to be folks that were involved, drug involved, meth largely these days. So they had high risk and high need, very high need, and those folks remain. So track one remains today, and that's largely what we have in our population, with I think maybe one exception remaining. Track two was created largely as a way to deal with folks who had OWIs, drunk driving charges on a 4th or 5th or 6th level or above. And in their situation, and it's largely was 4, 5, and 6 perhaps, in their situation, when the legislature changed the sentencing requirements with regard to OWI 5s and 6s, there's essentially a mandatory 1.5 year prison sentence now. It can be a year, but generally speaking, it's at least 1.5 years. And so they're not available to participate in treatment court, and that essentially took away the population for that track. So that's the long way of explaining. The handbook has got 2 tracks. It's got all kinds of stuff that we've got to look at, and now we've got a different treatment model that we obviously had referenced the method of treatment and who's providing the treatment and what kind of treatment it was in the handbook materials, and so we've got to update all of that. So it's a project, and Liesl Nelson, who's our public defender representative in treatment court, took a crack at it to start. I think Kate and Phil are going to work on it next, and hopefully we'll bring it back to the subcommittee. The subcommittee's meeting next week. We'll probably deal largely with the treatment issues that we've talked about, and then the following meeting, hopefully we'll be able to get to our handbook and make those changes. So, kind of boring, but that's what we need to do because we don't have a handbook that fits what we're actually doing right now.
Thank you. So I believe Judge Waterman indicated, but his next meeting is April 3rd, and Judge Nordstrand's is March 23. So again, if anyone's interested in attending, just to get a sense as to what those groups are doing, certainly feel free to contact the judge in charge, and we'll make sure you're aware of the date, time, and place. Domestic violence, Judge Flack.
First of all, I want to thank all the persons who attend our meetings, not only the subcommittee members, but also the public. We used to meet in the small room down the hallway. Last meetings, we have to meet in this room. And it's just amazing to me, the participation we get and the topics we cover on a civil basis. And Judge Watt, I need to say, don't worry about being forgetful when you're my age. It's just kind of daily basis, so don't. Yes. But I also want to, we used to meet every other month. Then we decided to meet every 3rd month because we have, I think, 3 or 4 subcommittees that we would like to act on certain areas, be it identifying persons who should be in the DV court, et cetera. By the way, my job is easy. I receive the DV court on one Wednesday a month, and when they're in front of me, I say, you get to go home tonight, or you get to go see Sheriff Knudsen. Now, it's a little more than that, because it's actually when you see individuals who are domestic violence perpetrators, which in my work are bad dudes. There are some dudettes, but not too many. And it's a passion of mine, and I have to realize that there's certain things that I wish I could do that I can't do, so I kind of tone myself back. But it's sometimes amazing when you have a person that you've seen in this justice system for years, suddenly the light goes on, and they realize that their partner or their spouse is a human being that deserves respect. And that's the primary thing we try to teach. I need to thank also publicly a number of people, and I'm going to forget some because especially Restorative Services started out with our tool to identify the scores on this, and thank you, Chief Rickert, and also Turning Point, lethality scores, and especially Mr. Hoyman. I know you don't want me to do this, but it was yourself and Mr. Lemke that actually got this off the ground. And I know you had to step down because of your new position. Congratulations again. But again, I may have missed somebody, but I think our next meeting is April
26th.
Good thing I didn't say April 19th because it's the 26th, and you're free to join. So it's at noon, and it's 11:30, and every now and then somebody I know sometimes gets lunch. So but that person's not out to lunch. So
Yes, Chief.
I guess just to follow up on the judge's comments, April 26th at our meeting, Lieutenant Coleman and I will be putting on a presentation kind of talking about the early part of a domestic where law enforcement gets involved and what our thoughts and roles are coming into it. I think we've spent quite a bit of time putting it together, so if you're interested of that perspective, kind of the pre as we approach and our considerations from the law enforcement perspective and up to the point of arrest, We're hoping that that will be educational. And also, from the judge's perspective, thank you, Judge Needham, for voluntolding him to go to this, because that's typically what he does to us in that committee, so thank you.
Can I just add one more thing? And I feel very, very strongly about this. The public really has no idea how these cases start and what law enforcement puts up with. They have no clue. And we do not do a very good job educating them. And they'll see something in the paper, it's nothing. They see the tip of the iceberg. And so I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Any questions of Judge Black on the DV subcommittee? Behavioral health, Bob, anything additional?
Yeah, Judge, thank you. We last met at the end of January. Our next meeting will be March 27th at 10:30 at the Services Center. At the last meeting, Char Lopez provided some current data, at the time, current data on co-responders and the work being done by certified peer specialists. We also discussed the summit and the white paper that would be drafted to provide policy direction, recommendations for that group. We talked about the ambulatory withdrawal management project that we're involved with Western Wisconsin Health on, that we hope to start in May. That would be an outpatient withdrawal management service. It's physician-focused with behavioral health supports built in. We're just working through the purchase of services contract for that, but that would be a situation where somebody entering the hospital or the emergency department who is in acute withdrawal would have the an additional focus placed on their care by a physician, and follow-up clinics for medication-assisted treatment would be offered with behavioral health supports, counseling, and all of that. So we're using ARPA funding to support that effort that we received in 2021. And Kathy and Phil provided an update on the MAT grant, the medication-assisted treatment grant at the jail. And just a quick update, our substance use disorder services, as the judge mentioned, we had a number of vacancies toward the end of last year. We're currently almost fully staffed. We have one opening left for a counselor that's posted. And the holdup on our intensive outpatient program is that we're waiting for a certification from the state. We had to go through, after a rule review or a rule revision last fall, Rule 75, to make services more integrated. We had to apply for a number of certifications, and that's the holdup on that. So when we get that certification, hopefully soon, then we'll have that option available again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Raritt? And former Chief Borchatz, we're up and running with MAT, correct? So again, just to refresh, that's the program where we're administering medications to inmates who have substance addictions, basically to help them with their addictions. I think when Kathy reported, we were still in the phases of implementation, introduction, and I had a fellow in court the other day who is in that program, and literally it's saving his life by being able to get that medication given his significant addiction. So just an update on that. The last item on the agenda is going to be a discussion with Kathleen Hankus, and I'll turn it over to Phil for introduction purposes.
Discussion. So this is Kathleen Hankus. She joins us from the Chicago area, right? Kane County?
Kane County.
Too often, I'm very, very guilty of this when talking about policy. I look at it from my perspective, the justice system and how I perceive it, and don't necessarily get the perspective of somebody with lived experience. So that's what we're going to do today is get Kathleen's experience in the state of Illinois as a formerly justice-involved individual and some of the other work that she's currently doing. I have her bio here, but I don't, me reading it doesn't do justice. So why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself and we can get into it.
Thank you. Again, my name is Kathleen. I am formerly justice involved. Today I am 5 years clean from crack cocaine. I have been in prison 4 times in IDOC. In April, I start my sealing and expunging. In King County alone, I had 44 cases, not all charged, or convicted, but charged. 5 counties I got to deal with. I got around. So I am currently working, I was in our drug court system twice, over 27 years of addiction. So the first time I went around, I was able to get like 6 years sober. I was allowed out of state to a Christian long-term or drug and alcohol facility, Teen Challenge. It was implemental in helping me get some stuff straight. The last involvement started in 2016. I graduated in 2020. And since then, I've worked with, I got nominated by our chief judge, from our drug court judge to her chief judge, to be on the PFA implementation task force with the Illinois Supreme Court as an impacted individual. So I got to see some policy things getting in works in Illinois that just kind of got to pull on the plug for a minute. I'm back in school for social work. I'm heading towards my master's in social work. I work as a recovery coach with our drug court system, coming back as an alumni and getting to work with the participants on a whole different, it's a bunch of life issues, not always recovery-based issues. So many barriers to just life that really people with a lot of barriers don't know how to navigate the systems. I'm blessed to know how to do that and get a lot of stuff done, so I have a connection point with them, and it just seems to work. So Illinois is working with a lot of lived experience. I'm in a certification through College of DuPage. I transferred to Aurora University in the fall, heading towards my bachelor's in social work. But the first certification I started, Illinois opened up a certified recovery support specialist, kind of the peer support you were talking about. So I'm in an internship with a mental health facility doing that currently. And it's the first rollout, so there's a couple barriers in that, and kind of feeling the facilities figuring out where to utilize us. I think I had a foot in the door with drug court and seeing a great way to utilize it in the justice system. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Kathleen's connection to us, how she came to us, is Shelby did a training with Lakeisha's group at APPR, and so that's kind of the web there. So, Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about your pre-trial experience in Illinois, and maybe some of your thoughts on how it could have been improved upon and reducing some of that harm that we sometimes see in the justice system?
So my addiction started 27 years ago, and when I first came in, I started using at 21. Prior to that, I was a survivor of child abuse or sexual abuse. I had a father that was an alcoholic. Coming in, I was a very angry person. I was very authority, didn't want to deal with authority, didn't want people telling me what to do. The first case I got that got me into the system was a paraphernalia, and I got a supervision for that, and then I got another one. There was somebody else's stuff in my car, and then my own personal. I was avoiding being at home, so I was kind of bouncing amongst friends. What got me violated initially was an address change and lack of communication. So the trust, the lack of honesty on my part of feeling I was able to communicate what was going on, where I was at, that was a huge barrier. I was coming in with the stigma of the court system. My father was he was a great plumber. He made good money. We had a good life, but he was a severe alcoholic, and he organized his life in that manner. So I grew up with a sheriff that lived two houses down from me. I had a direct friendship with them. My father was getting DUIs in counties, two counties away, and he had a best friend that bonded him out, and that money went to attorneys and judges and whatever to get him out. He had 9 DUIs and he drove forever. I saw money buy things. I saw if you got into the system, you needed a lawyer. So when I got into the system, I wasn't going to do it that way, and went with public defenders and learned it was a very different system. So that stigma walking in and kind of turning my back on what my family, my dynamic was going on with my dad and money, I had a very different experience. So I didn't feel, what I see today is I didn't feel that I got the same services. So this is fabulous. The collaboration on all the different entities is thumbs up to you guys and communicating the need today. But the lack of trust, the stigma I was coming in, the judgment, it was just walking in and having a face. I wasn't always, I didn't look like this. I was stinky. I was, I had a bad attitude. I was very standoffish. So some of that was, most of it was on my part. But the change came with a couple of coordinators I ran into and their approach to me. I could feel the definite difference. It's definitely changed in the last 5 years. 27 years ago, it was very different. If I didn't show up, if I was rude, if I was, 2 minutes late, it was a violation. It was privileges pulled. The threat of going back in, of getting put in, was hindering all the time.
Thank you. Again, in your encounter with the justice system in Illinois, and certainly differences between states, I can speak a little bit to Illinois as a former probation officer in Southern Illinois. So, but can you talk a little bit about how you were treated, whether or not you perceived it to be fair, and some of the dignity or maybe lack thereof of the system?
Most of the part, King County was pretty good. I've dealt with DuPage, Kendall. I feel like I was always directly treated fair, but I don't think the delivery was always there, So population of substance abuse, from my standpoint, we're pretty good. We pick up on nonverbals, we pick up on character, whatever opinions you have, looking at us, facial expressions, and so again, the delivery, So I do believe that I was treated fair, maybe in time availability, where I felt like it was just a run through, So the time availability to, the need base that I have going on and I needed to address, I don't think the time was put in to figure that out. And I also don't know if pretrial is switching into that avenue. I know resource-wise that it's hoping to get there, but it's more systems, Today I see huge changes in that, where people are addressing people as people and looking at the barriers and the needs that they couldn't look at my time period, so.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think just, again, from my perception, which is very limited, pretrial is changing rapidly across the country, certainly here in Wisconsin and otherwise. But let's look at that idea for a second. So that initial court appearance, maybe it was your first time being entered into the justice system. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you think you had adequate resources at that first appearance?
No. It's very fast. You go in. Number one, for me in substance abuse, my first goal was to get out of, I was usually taken in custody, in handcuffs. I never had money for bond. I wasn't calling my parents. They weren't coming if I called. And so it was too fast. Trying to utilize the public defender system, I don't feel like there was adequate conversations ahead of time to understand kind of what is available to do in that initial court date. And in my mind, coming out of substance abuse on the first 24 hours or whatever, I wasn't really focused on caring. I just wanted out, So like trying to communicate, even if the delivery was appropriate and they approached me, I wasn't trying to hear it. My goal was one thing, to get out, to get back to what I was doing, or to keep my structure safe and people that helped me stay in that. So, to kind of impart a break in that is huge. But the first court date, I don't remember conversations. I don't remember people directly asking. It was just in, out, here's your paperwork, go back. If you need a phone card, oops, you missed your opportunity because you didn't ask, or you didn't know to ask. So, yeah.
And you mentioned the public defender's office, but at that first appearance, as far as you can recall, what if any, was your interaction with like the state's attorney or the prosecutor's office?
I think initially, like 27 years ago, I was before all the extra criminalization, I was available to where they would speak with me to kind of impart, I don't know another word, but there was a deal, not a pass, but it was like I was eligible based on my crime for something, where they would lower a sentence or whatever like that. So that was my early years in getting involved in the system, where that was a goal, right? Because they're like, talk to the state's attorney, they'll lower it. But very quickly, that was maybe my first or second experience, and then I graduated very quickly. So it no longer was that conversation. It was IDOC directive, and after my first IDOC, it was always the directive. It was not a treatment, it was not a diversion program. Yeah.
And with pretrial, can you talk a little bit about some of the conditions that you were subject to on pretrial release during the time?
So a little further down the road in my addiction, I got a stolen vehicle charge of a girlfriend that I used with that I really didn't steal, but I got charged with it. I went to prison, came home, and I didn't realize that my driver's license had been revoked based on criminality in a vehicle. So it was revoked on that purpose. I came back out, went to driving, realized my license was revoked. Couldn't obtain the process to get my full license back. So to comply, drug tests, show up, get assessments done, things like that. I was not navigating that very well with services, with public transportation, with asking for help. Pre-trial at that time, they weren't offering like bus passes, they weren't asking, you know, so it was like back within my control. I brought my dad's character in. I'm kind of a control freak. I want to handle it myself. I'm going to drive, you know, so it was like charge after charge after charge to keeping it in my control of what I could do, and I could drive, and that got me back to prison. But it wasn't the stipulations. Like 27 years ago, the first violation I got for not reporting my mailing address in that county, it was a tough county. I got sentenced for the very first time to prison on that because I violated, because I didn't get my address changed off of a possession of a paraphernalia very early in my addiction. You know, there was no communication like, what's going on? Where are you staying? Are you okay? You know, nothing. Today, and I don't even, like we were talking about, I don't really have a full understanding. I'm in such a niche of drug court and hands-on that I'm really not knowledgeable of what exactly pretrial can address. So I apologize on that. That's your area. But for me, the stipulations, the testing, you know, being in active use was intimidating. It was, I didn't want to show up if I was fearful of getting locked up, you know. It was very well communicated. You know, you get a drop, if you drop dirty, we take you in right there, you know, you go and turn yourself in next door. That's impeding my use, you know, that's impeding my life. It might impede my possessions in my car. It might impede, you know, things, anything going on. So I wasn't actively involved in wanting to comply.
Sure. When we look at pre-trial, we look at what can we do to make sure folks come back to court, right? That's one of the things that's important. Remaining arrest-free, public safety, all those elements are very important. Do you think any of the conditions you had on pre-trial helped to increase some of that return to court and remaining arrest-free?
Years ago, no. Today, the last exposure I had to our pretrial division is it's changed. So we had pretrial, I guess it would be like an assessment taker, interviewer, show up directly into the court, and it was a more in-depth taking a look at my history of where I've been, where what I've tried. Can I comply if I was released? Can I fulfill what they need me to do to get back to court? So that was a whole different experience, having somebody ask, look into, see if I was setting up myself to fail, if I could get out, if I had a willingness to comply and I was out, what were the barriers I was going to deal with to comply with getting back to court and showing up. It was a communication, so that was the first difference I noticed. So years ago that wasn't going on. That pre-trial was implemental in helping me get to drug court, and seeing that my substance abuse was every single reason I ever criminalized in my life, and giving me a length of time committed to a program to making that change. The pre-trial itself moment was such a glimpse that it's very hard to focus just on that because I have such an in-depth of hands-on warm handoffs of our system. Today, seeing pre-trial imposed, the one thing I do remember is like I'd get released out of jail and I had to go check in next door. I would get out with a friend, girlfriend, be with a gentleman that was released, different color, different nationality. In our county, I was raised pretty well, I know how to talk pretty well, assert myself. If somebody else walked out to that counter with me, there were barriers, you know, if they didn't know how to communicate what they were there for, what they were needing, they weren't as received as well. And I'm that person where I'm like, she's saying she's out of jail checking in, you know, and I was a natural advocate for other people right from the get-go, but I saw many things that, you know, if people didn't have the assertiveness I had or the communication skills, that they weren't as received as well, you know, and that's the population that needs help. You know, I'm working today with people that have huge barriers, that have reading elements, that are generationally in the system, that have no life skills. I'm very blessed to have a lot of life skills, good or bad, how I got them, but I got them. And the population I'm working with today, that's where that break needs to come. And so at the pre-tri level, seeing that and having a direction of that component is imperative. No, you're fine, go.
And that's one thing that Shelby and the pre-trial team are working towards is helping people navigate the criminal justice system, which is confusing even for people that have worked in it for decades. And then, like you said, being able to articulate why you're there. We get folks sometimes that will show up for like a compass assessment, and they'll show up like at the county clerk's office, and they'll come and get us because they're not certain why they're there. And so improving some of those communications, I think you're spot on, is really important. Just a kind of a last question. So again, bail continues to change throughout the country, and here in this county, again, historically, or maybe not historically, but prior to pretrial services being in justice services, it was in the sheriff's department, and it was a law enforcement model. Right. And now we've made this transition to a civilian-run model. As we continue to evolve, would you have any advice for our jurisdiction or others that are evolving?
I think it's fabulous. The collaboration here in the different parts of this room is just phenomenal, and your communication levels. Being a part of the PFA, I went into that in Illinois, and that was for elimination of cash bond. I didn't go into that because I agreed to it. I went into it because I was nominated as an impacted individual to have that experience and to have a voice on there of my perception of it. For me, my jail was a rescue for my substance use. It was a break. My addiction is unique with it being crack, to maybe not so much today, fentanyls and everything, but people are dying, you know, getting out. So to me, that period of time gave me moments of clarity. It was more scary. It was a great thing to like have a break. The stress came off. I knew I had 3 hots and a cot, whatever you want to call it. I knew I was okay, you know. I wasn't always gracious locked up either. I was tired and hungry and didn't want to wake up, didn't want to talk to anybody. It was a recovery, you know, and I needed that. On the involvement, I think the only thing I could offer is behavioral change is huge, going through school, learning that component. I don't always have the knowledge or the wheelbase for every situational whatever, and I've had instructors and mentors in supervision redirect me to just treat people as human beings. You know, I've gone in where I was, you know, over-sexualized as a kid, and I have a target on mind, you know, if I could deem you and like steer you with a smile, know what's coming at you, know and understand. You know, ACEs is huge. Before my addiction ever started, I had stuff going on, you know, I brought that in, I picked up of my own volition, it helped me feel better at the time, you know, to get out of that is a huge transition. Making those changes is scary. Treat people well. Recognize that, watch your facial expressions, watch your body language, smile, you know, take a deep breath and just relax and slow down a little bit. It goes a long way. I do remember a pretrial, I came in, I was pretty much homeless in a car in a hotel, dead of winter where we had more snow in Chicago, and I didn't have a coat, you know, and they were making some changes in Kane County, and they went into a closet and she brought me a coat. They were beginning to ask questions of what needs I needed to be safe, comfortable, and to comply with what I needed to do to get back to court. those small changes in being made to feel human matter. So you lose your worth, you lose your value, you lose what you were talking about of teaching a younger society of right and wrong. And to get back to that takes people treating people well. And I think I had some small changes in that along the way that opened my heart up to knowing that everybody wasn't out to get me, you know. So lowering my guard and seeing that gave me a little bit of hope. Today, being a person with lived experience, that's my huge thing, that it's possible. You know, just being able to communicate, you can do this. You know, you absolutely can get through this well. I'll help you, you know, let me know. And I think the networking, I don't know the whole structure of the justice system. I know pretrial is a part, but being able to network, communicate, having a tie and a connection to other resources, and if it's available, figure out what those barriers are at the beginning point to help them get through court well. You know, it's an option to showing them that they have worth, that they're worth getting through this well, and they can make some changes. So that's it.
That's all we have. Kathleen, unless you have anything else you want to add, if there's any questions?
Well, thank you very much. Compelling. Are there any requests for future agenda items? And if so, let Phil, me, or anyone else on executive committee know. We'll plan then to meet. Our next full meeting is on May 11th at 8 o'clock in this room. By way of announcements and correspondence, I simply will remind all of you that there is an election on April 4. A number of local races, referendum, Supreme Court justice will be elected. And then there's also the public safety referendum that St. Croix County is proposing. And so I encourage you to vote, as well as to encourage your neighbors and others likewise to get out and vote. Absent that, we will stand adjourned. Thank you. Good meeting.